It's a huge honor for everyone at Keeping It 100 to welcome a trailblazing performer and a bona fide wrestling legend, the one and only Vader, to the show to chop it up with us.
We were talking off the air about something that none of us even knew. You know, I live here in San Diego, so I'm always in LA for a lot of things. But we had no idea that you had lived or grown up in Compton, California.
Actually, I was born and raised in Linwood.
Right.
Born in Linwood at the St. Francis Hospital, and I was living in Compton when that occurred. And I stayed in Compton till I was born in the late 50s, so I stayed there for probably the first 12 years of my life. And
but what was the demographic? What was the demographic like in the 50s in Compton?
50s, I don't know. I don't know. I probably would say it was majority white. But
Right.
as I was growing up in the 60s and even the early 70s, it was predominantly black and Hispanic and a few. I guess it was the minority was white. And the reason we were there is that my mother wanted to live next to her mother, and we couldn't get her to move. So that was just something that was part of the deal.
And what was it like growing up as a white guy in a predominantly black and Mexican, neighborhood?
Well, Vader time didn't exist then, so I had to bluff it, man. The bottom line was, man, you either stood your ground and fought, or you ran like hell. And I was a big fat white kid, and I couldn't run very fast, so I ran when I could, and I stood my ground when I had to. And I got a number of ass whoopings, and I dealt out a couple too. But it was a tough way to grow up. And when I got out of, in other words, football, as a football player, I became wanted by a lot of schools, 30, 40 different schools, being recruited out of high school, going into the college ranks. And when I finally got to Boulder, where I'm here now, this seemed like Disneyland. It was no one wanted to beat you up, and when you walked out your house, you didn't have to, see if the path was clear to get you a car. And
Did you by chance see the movie Straight Outta Compton?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, I sure did. That was.
Go ahead.
I think that was right around my time. I was probably prior to that, by about 6, 7, 8 years prior to all that happening. Because I remember Yokozuna and I were good friends. And I remember when he came to Japan the first time, dripping wet, about 380, and he was bringing all that rap because he was from that area, that Compton area, and he introduced me to an Eazy-E tape.
Wow.
And I said, "This is what's going down in my old town." And he said, "Yeah." And I don't think Yoko was living in Compton, but Yoko was close by. He was an inner city kid also. So we kind of hit it off on that basis, knowing what we went through growing up. And he was pretty much still living it because he lived. I think he lived in Carson. I'm not sure.
Bro,
so
he was
all part of it.
Yeah, he was a straight G. The first time I met him, I couldn't believe all the respect he had on the street, bro. And he was real. And he also introduced me to this artist who I had never heard of at the time, called Master P. He was into all that gangster rap.
Yeah, Yoko was into all of that, and he would bring, every time he came back to Japan, he would bring a tape, and we would listen to it on the bus and so on and so forth, and until the Japanese guys would tell us to turn that shit off. They didn't understand it.
Let me ask you a question. Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, you were a big guy, obviously, growing up in that neighborhood, bro. Did trouble, because being a big guy and growing up in a predominantly black and Hispanic neighborhood, were people constantly challenging? You know how it is, where the big guy, everybody always wants to try him. You know what I'm saying? Did you fight a lot?
For me, growing up, it wasn't about necessarily winning the fights, because I was a bigger kid, and I would play with kids that were 13 and 14 when I was 9 or 10. So when we got into an argument playing ball or basketball or whatever the game was, we would get in a fight, and everyone would square off and say, okay, settle your dispute, and you would fight, and necessarily you didn't always win respect by winning, and it's the type of fight you gave up and you put up, and so I think that
right.
that's
They wanted to see
where I wouldn't back down.
Yeah, they wanted to see what heart you had.
Yeah, it was all about heart, and would you be there for them if they were getting their ass kicked or in some trouble? Would you be there, and would you be an effective friend or gang member? And so that whole lifestyle is I remember it. I remember it vividly, and it and I obviously I prefer where I'm living. This is like Disneyland. I remember getting off the plane and taking that ride into Boulder. It was just a valley up against the Rocky Mountains, just beautiful. Yeah, the college was nestled up against the Rocky Mountains, and they were offering me this and this, and a full ride to school. And man, everybody was white and had money and were handing me money. So I said, yeah, I think I could do this. So this is where I came. This is where I stayed, man.
So the first time I ever saw you, Vader, was so impressive. You were in New Japan, and you had the headpiece that shot out the smoke, and you'd put it in the middle of the ring, and it was so way before its time. And who were the guys that when you got there that maybe tried to test you a little bit in the ring from the Japanese boys just to see what you had?
Well, Inoki, obviously he tested me. He story about Inoki, man. We were in the Sumo Palace, and I was supposed to fight Fujinami, and Fujinami just said no at the last minute, and really uncharacteristic about the Hall of Famer that we know now as Fujinami. He just said no. He didn't know what I was about. Right. And I think what he had said was, Inoki, we need to talk about this, and Inoki didn't really ever get to him. So at the last moment, Inoki just stood up and said, man, I'm not going out in the ring, because I had been introduced and was in the ring first, and Fujinami was supposed to come out to the sold-out Sumo Palace main event. And so Inoki had already fought and won and was backstage. So Inoki came out. Right. And Inoki had not been beat for, I think, a decade. He had not lost a fight for a decade. And if you could imagine that type of power going into the ring and the Japanese support for that, and see, they believed in this guy. And back then, in Japan, things were still a shoot. The people believed that Inoki hadn't been beaten 8 years. Right. And so he got into the ring and said, Masa Saito went over, was yelling at Inoki, and they were like, what the fuck do you want to do? And Inoki said, tell him to knock me out. And I hit him pretty good about the 2-minute mark, and we went home. So, I mean, wow. This is my first match in Japan, brother. And I had been working in the AWA, and I had been working in Europe for a guy named Otto Vance, and I had been a world champion for him, over 3 or 4 time world champion over in Europe. But now, man, I come to Japan the first time, and I knocked this legend out, megastar. I mean, right. It was beyond, I don't have the words. I mean, you can take Hulk Hogan in his prime and multiply that times about 10, and that was Inoki during this 10-year run. Imagine,
Vader, he's a senator now in Japan.
Yeah, remember the Japanese diets. That's what I'm talking about. This guy was, so he said, not only beat him, but knock him out and beat him in 2 minutes.
Talk about making
Yeah, well, it did. I mean, and you know what? That investment that night, and Inoki knew how to make somebody, and he was out to prove Fujinami wrong. He had told the story later that Fujinami was second-guessing the system, and that he said, we had done our research on this guy, and he knew that I would come through and would be able to work the Japanese style for the 20 or 30-minute matches that I would have to do. Right. And so anyways, man, they started rioting, man. They were coming toward the ring, and they were in the Sumo Palace. They sit on pillows, right?
Right.
And so So they took these pillows and lit them with their lighters. See, everyone in Japan smokes, or they did back then. We're talking, yeah, everyone smokes, man. So they just took their lighters out and lit these pillows on fire and were throwing them at me. And the ring was full with fire pillows. And I'm going, is this part of the tradition? Or are they so pissed off at me?
Right.
And Master said, they're pissed off at you, and we got to get the fuck out of here.
Okay. Now let me ask you a question. Since when you went to WWE and like you were doing the moonsault, right?
Yeah.
And
Actually, I did that. I did the first one in the WCW. But go ahead.
Okay, yeah, but that's where like people first saw you doing it, and which is obviously a smaller man move, if you will. And I remember like a couple months ago, there was like a lot of maybe controversy, and I don't know if maybe something you said was taken out of context, or that's exactly how you meant it.
Well, it was taken the way I meant it to be taken. I wanted to create heat. I saw this kid on, and right now and for the record, forevermore, I saw Willow Spray working a match with, God, what's the other kid's name? Ricochet. And I went, my God, there's the future of wrestling. And you know what? You have to say that could be the history, and really in hindsight now, I thought, well, that is the history, that these athletic, gymnastic type athletes, they're going to take over wrestling because it's so damn entertaining. And it was what I was watching was impressive to me beyond anything I had seen. Because I think from where I started out, in the 80s and the stories that we told. I mean, my matches with HBK and with Mick Foley and The Undertaker and Sting and Inoki and Fujinami. I mean, the list goes on of all the great opponents I've had over the years, and I'm very fortunate to have had them. But suddenly, I've seen for the first time in my wrestling career, I see something that's new and something that was catching on, and it is catching on. So I'm thinking, you know what? First thing I want to do is talk good about it? No, everyone's doing that. Everyone's kissing this guy's ass like he's the heir apparent to wrestling. And so I thought, I'm gonna shoot him down and see what I can create. So I shot him down what I thought was valid critique, because what they were doing, and if you look at that match honestly, they were spot monkeys. They just do spot after spot after spot. There was no real story told, and that part of my critique was valid. But other than the fact that it wasn't any good, and I mean that was all bullshit on me to piss everybody off, and I did. I mean I had the whole Twitter world pissed off at me, but it was by design on my part. So eventually I contacted this kid, and we were going back and forth pretty hot and heavy at each other. I said, "Are you serious about all this?" He said, "No, I'm just following along." I said, "Same here, man. Why don't we get together and do some business?" And he said, "Let's do it." So he contacted his promoter, and $15,000 later, I went over there for a week and did up-team personal appearances, and I did 2 or 3 matches in some other promotions, and autograph sessions in here, because it was like anything that any place I showed up prior to that match, it just did great business. Him and I showed up at a little theater that held 400 people. And this was 4 days prior to the match, and it sold out, and there was standing room only. And we did a Q&A, and of course we shared the money on everything that arena. So I mean, I was getting the big hit. I was getting really knocked. Vader's stupid, and Vader's this. He don't know wrestling. And I know wrestling as big as anybody knows wrestling. Believe me,
You've wrestled everywhere on top. Yeah.
Everywhere on top. I know what's good and I know what's bad. And what I saw wasn't just good. It was innovative. But in the same breath, every new innovative style has some problems. And I see one problem in that style is it's just basically it has no regard for a story. It's spot after spot after spot. And it is entertaining, but you never really catch your breath and go, wow, who's winning or losing here? You don't really know. Right. And that may be a negative. And you know what? The average fan today may say, we don't give a shit. We like it. And it's entertaining. It's like one breathtaking move after another. We don't care about the story. And, if they're paying the dime at the gate, and they're willing to pay it. I mean, who am I to say that's that's not the deal going forward? But again, and so when I went over and fought this guy, he came in with this list of spots. He said, well, we're going to do this spot, and then we're going to do this spot, and we're going to do this spot. And I said, but that's not how I work. I said, I'll try to adapt to you, but you got to adapt to me a little bit. And he did. Much to his credit, he did adapt to me. We had we had a makings of what could have been a fantastic, 5-star match. But I mean, literally, 2 hours before the match, I couldn't stand up and breathe right. I mean, I had a bad back where, if you ever had a bad back where you try to stand up and you can't, you got to bend over to get relief.
Yep.
And that's what it was for me, man. I was breathing, couldn't breathe, standing up straight, and I couldn't, so I was laying on the locker room floor, and they said, well, I'm stretching, how's your back? And I said, it's fucked. And well, you got to go, now, it's they had sold out the building plus 50% capacity seating, and couldn't get another person in that ring. So, all in all, look what happened. Some worn out old man, critique some, criticize some young kid. And,
but that's a social media. That's a social media world we live in now.
Bro, let me tell you something too. Is that that's the wrestling fans today live on the web. They're on the internet. I mean, they're not might not be a lot of people that actually go to the shows, but every wrestling fan is still on the web. And the best thing, bro, I saw the heat that you had when you were, and you had legit heat, which is hard to get these days in wrestling, because in wrestling today the fans usually cheer both the guys, but they were chanting "F you Vader." F you Vader is good heat, but bro, think about that. This is the landscape of wrestling. What's ahead? If you go on the internet and to basically call a guy a bad worker to his fan base, that's the way to get heat these days. And it's the funniest thing is that's almost like the way to work the heat. To work.
Nah, man, let me tell you something. I went above and beyond that. I said I could take a high school kid, a high school gymnastics star, and teach him exactly what this kid was doing. And you know what?
That was
so far-fetched.
But I'm going to tell you, that's
so far-fetched.
It's far-fetched, but it's not that far from the truth,
It's far-fetched.
No. This kid's got real talent, and this kid is going to be someone. Maybe he'll taper down these series of high spots that he's doing and create a little story, because, I made him do that. I said, no, let's sit down and talk about this, and let's put in this and put in this, and, we'll still get your spots in, maybe not as many of them, but, you allow me to work in there. Because with my bad back and at my age, I mean, I'm just not the spot monkey that I used to be.
And bro, you took a lot of great bumps for your size, and then you were a great worker for your size too. Not good, but great. But here's the other thing that I wanted to say. No, straight up. But here's the other thing I wanted to say is that it's when Disco says it's not so far from the truth that you could get like a gymnast and turn him into a wrestler. Absolutely not. These guys are elite athletes at what they do, and they're not just doing gymnastics. They got to sell, even though they don't sell in those matches, they still got to sell. They got to protect their opponent. They got to protect themselves. They got to be in shape. There's so many, bro. It's not that easy to be a wrestler, but
I'm aware of that.
I'll tell you what is sad to me in Disco, Vader, is that, they shouldn't get away from the storytelling, because every now and then I love to see good Ricochet, Will Ospreay, no story match, but there's nothing like a good story.
Yeah, but maybe that's where it's headed. Maybe we're going into the spot monkey season or decade or era, and then maybe we'll go full boat into that, and then it'll phase down into, well, let's get back to the story. Let's keep the spot monkey stuff because it's so damn entertaining. And I'm not saying this is where it's headed. I'm saying it could be, because let's face it, what I saw that kid doing and what I've seen him do since is extremely entertaining. And if you can sell the house with this kid doing flips and negating the story somewhat, if you sell out the sellout, and if it's hot, it's hot. Go with it. I mean, that's what the promoter's going to do.
And you know what? And you know
what?
what, Vader? One other thing. If you look at the WWE locker room in your head from 20 years ago, 15, 10, and now it's just much smaller. You know, the big giants that used to be around are no really longer around as much. It's a smaller wrestlers, younger wrestlers with that lucha, infused, high flying style. So it is going in that direction.
Bro, Vader, Vader, let me ask you this.
Well, that's where Vince is going too. He's talked to this kid, and Vince has got this guy in, jotted down for part of his future, I think. I mean, Heyman talked to him. Heyman flew over to England and talked to this kid about bringing him over, and the kid, rightfully so, and it's too soon. He's 23. He'll get ate up by, the older hands there in WWE go now. But as he gets older, that'll be an obvious move for him. There's something that's very, very dear to me, and something that just happened to me recently. I went to a heart doctor, and he said my heart's fine, everything's okay in that area, but that I had been taking pain pills, pain medications prescribed. I'm not saying I was taking these things illegally, because I wouldn't do that. I have more respect for myself and the law than that. But I was taking, I've been taking pain pills, and I've been taking sleep, opiates, and benzoids for a long, long time. And the doctor said, your heart's starting to show wear, and you're still 365 pounds, and you're closing in on 60. And Leon, one of these days you're going to wake up and you're going to have a heart attack. And then from that point, life becomes different. After a first heart attack, you haven't had one yet, so why don't we become proactive? Start being responsible for what you put in your mouth. And I'd always depended on these pain pills and these sleeping pills to go to sleep, and the pain pills that and you need them after a match. You go in. Yeah, you really do, to deal with the pain and be able to go to the gym and get ready for your next match. You need them, but. So I basically got a wake-up call from this heart doctor saying, you need to get off of them. So they suggested that I go to rehab, and I went to rehab, and all the young kids in there, they knew who I was. And so I decided to be the father figure of the group. And, these kids are in there for meth and cocaine and all kinds of things. And, I was there for prescribed medicine, but it was the same thing. I was still addicted. And I had to say those words, that I had become a person that was addicted to medication. They were addicted to another kind of medication, but in reality, it was the same thing. So I get out of rehab, and I've weaned myself over to this non-addictive, in other words, it didn't do any damage to your heart. It was a much milder. It was called Subutex, and I believe it's a new generation medicine on the market. And it basically, you take 1-3 times a day, and it controls pain, but it's not as effective. It doesn't control acute pain. And then for sleep, because I've been on sleeping meds, there's a new generations of sleep meds out, and they're, and I'm going to screw up these names, but Maripine and Terazoxin and hydroxy. And so this was, in other words, when I got out of rehab, that they had put me on these meds and said, Leon, take these meds as prescribed, and you'll be able to sleep, but you're not going to be addicted. And then the next step is, a year or two down the road, we'll get you off these, and we'll get you off everything. In other words, when you're retired. And so I was using these meds because a doctor told me to. And here's my whole point, guys. You have to be, everybody, every wrestler listening to this, every young man or young woman listening to this, you have to be responsible for what you put in your mouth. So based on some doctor telling me it was okay to use these in conjunction, to use these 4 medications in conjunction, in other words, at the same time, that you'll be okay. Well, it wasn't okay. So this basically had a toxic buildup because they were prescribed wrong to me. In other words, the pills, the medications by themselves were fantastic. They're great. But
in the system at the same time, right?
At the same time had a toxic effect. And one of the toxic effects one of the effects of taking these meds were you would hallucinate and you would see things that wasn't there, and you would lose your equilibrium and you would fall. And So I go over to England on these meds, and I wasn't myself. And in training, I hurt my back to where, and I just wasn't myself. In other words, I was just starting to be affected by these medications in England, and that was the whole Ospreay match. And yes, it was a good match, and I pulled it off, but it still wasn't Vader. It wasn't the Vader you're used to seeing. And I wasn't as snappy, and my back was hurt. And then I came back to Boston, and a good friend of mine, and I'll say his name, Kevin Nash, said, he called me up after that and said, "Leon, do you know what you did?" And I said, "No, I had no memory or recollection that I did this and I did that." I'm going to leave out the specifics, but again, my point is, we all have to be responsible for what you put in your mouth. And then I came home, and my roommate called my son and said, "You need to get here because your dad has slipped out." And I'm still taking these meds, and I'm making the problem worse and worse. But the doctor told me to do it, so it was okay. No, not true, guys. You really have to do your own research, and you have to go beyond what we've been used to. Konnan, you've probably had medications that were prescribed,
right.
The pain pill or whatever. But now it's with these new generation drugs. It's like they're trying to get everybody on these things and take us off of what we've known to be safe for years and years and years. And I'm not telling anyone what to do. I'm saying be responsible for your own actions and what you put in your mouth. Because what happened to me next was my son came. He flew from Dallas, and we're talking and we're okay. And he notices differences in me, and then I'm talking to the wall, and I'm talking to the love seat and the wall. And Jesse went, "Well, who are you talking to?" "Well, so-and-so's right there." And I was having a full-on blown conversation with somebody that I had known from my past. And so Jesse just sits there in amazement because this is his father. This is, Big Van Vader. This is Leon White, the college graduate, and just things like this never has happened. The father that he knew that raised him, that put him into college and paid for his college education, and the father that he looked up to in so many ways was talking to a chair. And so he said, "Father, I want you to go to bed." And I said, "Sure, I'll go to bed. And I'm kind of tired anyways." And I said, "But why?" And he said, "Well, we're going to go to the doctor's tomorrow and figure that out." And so I walk into my bedroom, and my bed had been put together wrong, and part of the frame was sticking out. And I told you earlier that you lose your equilibrium and you fall. I fell into this frame, and this corner of the frame stuck into my leg, and I nearly lost my life. I nearly bled to death right there.
Oh
I screamed, and my son came in, and this thing was it was sticking in my leg. We couldn't get it out, and blood was pumping out. It had severed 2 or 3 arteries. It cut a ligament. It cut a tendon, which is obviously, when you start cutting tendons and ligaments, and your ability to use your leg ever again properly is at stake. But I nearly bled left. My son managed to call 911, and they said, that your father probably won't make it. He's lost too much blood. And so they got the frame out. And that time, Jesse was trying to stop the blood, but he couldn't. So
did you go unconscious when that happened?
Yeah, I did. And so, I had been in contact with the doctor, and I've told her what happened. And, "Oh, you're blaming this on me? You're the one who prescribed the drugs." "Yeah, I'm pointing my finger dead at you and saying, I've hired an attorney, and we're going to be knocking at your door soon." And
so
fair warning. And
what are you doing for pain? Because if the first one's got you addicted and the other ones gave you hallucinations, what are you doing?
Well, I've done further research on the medicine that I went to rehab for, and there's good there, but you just can't take them together.
Okay.
You can take the Subutex by itself, and it will control your pain, but you can't take the other 3, and you can never take the 4 in conjunction, and because it just takes a very short time, and next thing you know, you're talking to walls, And you imagine doing that on the road in England. You imagine doing that on the road in Boston. I started out as a football player, guys.
Right.
And, that was going to be it for me. I was going to play 20 years of professional football, 15 years of professional football, and retire. And, I didn't get to do that. I played, 6 years in the NFL, and I ruptured a patellar tendon, and that was it for me. And I got into wrestling and was able to do this for a long time. So, although at one time I looked at myself as Leon White, the football player, the high school All-American, the two-time college All-American, the NFL first-round draft pick, and, the number one ranked center in the country, that these things were part of my past. I now had prided myself of being Big Van Vader, the professional wrestler. And that ability to entertain above all was so important to me. And I would never do anything to jeopardize that. This is really my reason for coming on is sooner or later, things I've said and done under the influence of these pills are going to get out. And I wanted to be forthcoming and say, things did happen. And I was out of my control. Something I had nowhere. I was taking medications that were affecting me, and I had no idea that it was even happening. And I had no memory the next day or moments after that I had done or said anything. And
it's amazing that you would share that, man. It's very brave, and I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot from this session. Do you agree, Konnan?
Yeah, well, the main thing I just wanted to say, Vader, is we've been in the same dressing room maybe 2 or 3 times. We never really, chopped it up, but it's so interesting to hear what you've said today, because I think a lot of people after hearing this are now going to have you in a different light. And, we all have speed bumps in our life. We all make mistakes, all of us. The problem is most people won't own up to them. And you're coming out here and you're saying what happened, bro. And we got nothing but respect for you, man, for that.
Thank you very much. You know what? The fact I almost lost my life is certainly, utmost on my mind. But just the fact that, I blindly put these pills in my mouth and could have certainly hurt myself. But you think about the time in Boston and the time in England, think about who else I could have hurt. I mean,
right.
Somebody that, and that's what bothers me, is that somehow, something I could have done or said would have caused somebody injury or, harm. And that really, I'm a God-fearing man, and that really bothers me. And I'm very boastful about it, but
the good thing, Vader, is you identified it. You've gotten it out of your system where everybody knows, and we appreciate your openness, your candor.
I'm talking to all the wrestlers out there right now, man. You don't want to be a cliche. You don't want to. I mean, I respect all the wrestlers that have gone before me, and the Rick Rudes and the Rowdy Pipers and Kurt Hennings, and the list goes on and on. I can keep talking, and that in itself is sad. But
right.
The one thing I told my son when I was bleeding on the floor was that I didn't want to die and become a cliche, another cliche, or another wrestler dies before his time. Right. And that was the one thing, I don't drink and I go to the gym, and I want to live a long, healthy life. I want to live into my, my late 70s, my early 80s even. And for a big man, that's saying a lot. For someone that, I'm sitting here at 365 pounds. So it just, that's what scared me the most, was that, someone would read the fact that I had passed, or hear it on TV or the radio or something, and say, oh, another one of those wrestlers died. When are they going to learn? And that, that wouldn't have been the case, but, it's now I get another chance, and hopefully by saying this, I've given someone else another chance. And that's where I'll close, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vader. Thank you very much. I wanted to speak out on this incredible Vader interview. Pain addiction is no joke. So many great friends and performers we have lost in the wrestling and entertainment field to drug addiction, not to mention how many people we personally know who have had an addiction or been in rehab. This is no longer a football or sports or wrestling problem. It's widespread. I never took a pain pill or any other opioids until I was in my late 30s. When I wrestled in Mexico, no one took pills. When I first went into the NWA, then I'm talking about early 90s and WWE, I would actually look down on wrestlers or anybody that was addicted to them as weak-minded individuals until I got to WCW myself. And between a combination of pressure, anger, needing something to cope, I became what I hated, an addict. I never was in any public scandals where people were aware of it, but Somas, Percocets, Vicodin, Xanax, and anything you needed to get up, come down, extra energy. Another wrestler had it or a fan could get it for you. It was prevalent. And half the office was using it too. You don't know how many times I saw wrestlers shaking in the hallways and the dress rooms and airports, passed out, having to have another person carry you to the car, driving you around because you were a mess. We were wrestling in pain with undiagnosed concussions. And I applaud the ones that never fell into that trap. But I did. I never went to rehab. I should have because I was too stubborn and proud to admit it. But I just quit. And it took a while. It was very hard because I would see how countless wrestlers would go to rehab, work the system, and get back on. So I was like, why am I going to go there? Because I'm going to do the same thing. But middle America now has a prescription pain problem, and now everyone is taking notice. Half the people with opioid addictions also have a mental illness or personality disorder. So Vader wasn't far from the truth when he was talking about this. I applaud Vader for coming out and facing his demons and asking for forgiveness. It was a very emotional interview that really touched me. And I hope you guys will visit his social media sites. Send him some love and let him know you appreciate all he's done. It all starts with support.